Lili by Martin Sanders Whiteley. Chapter 5. Travel and Interruption. We were on our way to the ship. We had gone shopping after Mina killed Jonathan and burned his house down. The fire spread very quickly, and had gotten coffins, as well as mourning attire, so we could pose as widows mourning the loss of our husbands, taking them back to our homeland. I didn't ever want to take it off. It was more beautiful than anything I had ever owned before, and it completed my image as the mysterious, shadowy thing that I had always read about growing up and had secretly hoped to be. Becoming a vampire had given me some hope of being able to live out my childhood fantasies. But my dreams of what vampirism would be like were beginning to crack. I certainly could kill someone to drink their blood. I had enough murderous rage in me. But I could never kill someone I cared about. As vicious as Mina had been, she had told me that she loved Jonathan. At first I had thought she was making some kind of joke, but something about her expression told me that she still loved him, albeit perhaps in some very twisted way. So why did Mina kill him so cruelly? I wanted to ask her, but I was scared. If she could do that to Jonathan, what would she be willing to do to me? I would never do anything like that to you, said Mina. Before I could react, a man ran out of the darkness, colliding with Lucy and knocking her to the ground. I could tell he was drunk and in a bad mood, and there was some combination of bloodlust and regular lust in the look in his eyes. I was prepared to feed for the first time, although only God knows what might have been in that man's blood. He had jumped on top of Lucy and was about to do something terrible to her, and I was about to do something terrible to him. But a voice rolled in on the fog that stopped us in our tracks. What it was saying was possibly the most mundane, unromantic thing possible, but the voice made it sound spellbinding. "Flower for your buttonhole, sir." Chapter 6. The Thorns of the Rose. The voice repeated the innocent question. "Flower for your buttonhole, sir." It was a phrase I had heard numerous times while walking down this street. There had been a flower girl selling flowers on this street not long ago. I had passed her on walks with Laura. I had wanted to give her something, but had no buttonhole to put a flower in. So I had given her my money and told her to keep the flower. The next day it was discovered that she had been murdered. This had to be her. The voice sounded similar, but it was oddly sweet, honey-like. At first it seemed like liquid honey, dripping with enticing sweetness. It was almost childlike in its innocence. But as the voice continued, the honey seemed to harden, began to crack, revealing hints of impatience underneath. The voice repeated its question from within the white haze. "Flower for your buttonhole, sir," it cooed melodically. A hand as pale and as delicate as that of a porcelain doll emerged from the fog, beckoning slowly to the man with one finger. The man, hesitantly, began to stand up. His eyes were riveted to the hand. Lucy, who was glaring at the man, pushed him all the way off of her. He fell on his knees, probably skinning them in the process. He stood back up, not making any sound, not looking back. His eyes were no longer focused on the hand, but on a pair of cat-like yellow eyes that had appeared above it. Lucy got up, brushing herself off and swearing under her breath. Suddenly, the figure was on top of the man, and he was on the ground, but sitting upright with the woman sitting in his lap. She moved too fast for me to tell, but she did look a lot like the flower girl. She sank her teeth into his neck, causing a messy spurt of blood. The man screamed and fell backwards, his head hitting the pavement. I flinched, and so did Mina and Lucy. I had expected them to be as unperturbed as they had been when Mina had bitten Jonathan. But it was clear that they were as horrified as me. The man continued to scream, his shrieks becoming increasingly garbled as his mouth filled with blood. The girl ripped her fangs from his throat, tearing the skin around them in the process, and wrapped her arms around him in faux embrace. She locked lips with him as he continued to cough up the blood. She rolled over until he was on top of her and ripped his mouth from hers, pulling his head up by the hair. Then she bent his head forward, allowing the remaining blood in his mouth to fall into her mouth, although much of it ran down the front of her dress. Then she slammed him back on the ground, reinserting her fangs into his neck. A new eruption of blood began in his mouth, overflowing and running down his chin, then down to his neck, where her tongue waited for the crimson waterfall. She continued draining him, her burning eyes never breaking contact with his. The man's eyes were struggling to stay open, and their once green irises had faded to gray. He had lost the ability to use his voice, although he was still trying. Tearing my eyes from the morbid fascination of the scene unfolding, I turned to Mina. "Do you know her?" I asked. "No, I haven't been a vampire for that long, so I don't really know any others. You were the first, besides Lucy and him." There was an intense amount of revulsion and hatred in that last word, far more than I had felt when I spoke Jonathan's name. Tossing his bloodless carcass aside with disproportionate strength, the girl wiped the blood smeared around her lips on her pink sleeve, then stood up to greet us with a beaming smile that showed off her blood-tipped canines. "Hi, my name's Cassandra, but I've always preferred Cassie. What's your name?"